Hello and welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast. I'm Phil.
And I'm Chris.
Today we have with us Lucy Giles from the University of Oxford. She is the animal care manager for the biology department. Lucy has a biology background, but has been dedicated to the care of birds, and more recently the care of the staff that care for the birds for the last 10 years. Recently, Lucy has co-authored a paper published in Nature Communications studying the predator-prey interaction between Swanson's hawks and Mexican free-tailed bats, which was the result of a sunny spell on a ranch in New Mexico. Most importantly, a big chunk of Lucy's role at Oxford is the day-to-day husbandry duties for the university's homing pigeon flock. Several times a year, she also gets the call up for preparing the birds for flight experiments, as well as sitting on the welfare and ethics board that assesses all the project plan. Lucy has a particular soft spot for pigeons, along with general love for all animals, and keeps horses and dogs at home. So, Lucy, thanks for coming on and talking to us today about pigeons.
No problem at all. It's an honor to be invited on.
So, do you have any other background with pigeons? Have you ever been around pigeons as a kid or anything like that, or is it you just came into it through the work?
So I have no pigeon background. I'm not quite sure how I got my job in the early days. So I've been doing it for 10 years now. I sort of stumbled into the role. Like I said, I'm not quite sure how. So my bird interest when I was younger was very much through keeping chickens. So I had chickens and quail, and we incubated our eggs. I also had some show chickens, so I know a little bit about the show bird world. And I think I sort of put that on my supporting statement for the job application, and somehow they thought that I was the best fit for the role. So I don't know what everyone else was like that they interviewed, but I got very lucky in getting the job. And 10 years down the line, and I'm still there. I don't really have a pigeon background at all.
Sometimes things just work out.
Yeah, really worked out for me. I've got one of the most incredible niche job roles I think there is out there.
How many pigeons are in the university's loft there?
So we've got around about 90. I think we're 92 at the moment, and they're split across two lofts. I never know if the lofts are big or small. To me, I think they're quite big, but that's because I'm the one that has to clean them out. So the lofts are about 6 by 2 meters.
Okay.
And the birds are spread fairly evenly across the two.
So roughly 6 by 18-ish foot.
I've got no idea. If you say so. I can get a converter out on my phone.
Are there, you guys have aviaries connected to each one of those lofts, or are they just a closed building?
No, so we have 2 aviaries attached to each one.
Where did the university come across these? Did they get them from a squab farm or a pigeon show, or?
So back in the day, I'm not really sure where they came from. I suspect they would have been reject homers from a friend of a friend, I would imagine. You may get a caller who says, no, you're completely wrong. They were the very best homers and we spent thousands of pounds on them. But I think it's really unlikely. And I'm trying to think when the lofts actually started. It must be at least 30 years ago. So we've had a good few generations of birds.
Oh, wow. Have you added any birds in the last 10 years that you've been running it?
Yeah, so I sort of decided that probably our flock was fairly inbred. We do have a few ferals come in and mooch about and pair up, which I'm normally quite happy with because it's good to have outside bloodlines. We get the odd stray as well, so we'll have pigeons come into the loft who are wearing racing rings who have got lost. In that scenario, I always report them through the website and then get hold of the owners. And normally the owner says, if you're happy to keep the bird, then keep hold of it. So that brings in some external blood. And then probably about 6 years ago, I bought 20 birds from Luella, who were quite a famous stud in the UK. And they were from Belgian bloodlines.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you got some decent stuff. They're not just a bunch of random ferals in there.
No, they're all massive as well. I don't know. Whenever a feral comes into the loft, I can always spot them straight away because they're not chunky. And ours seem to just have got bigger and bigger over the years.
So as it breaks down, it's a roughly 6.5 feet by 19.5.
Hey, so we're doing math. There we go. So what is that square foot there, Maker?
Well, if you did 20 by 6, it would be what do you got there? 120 square feet.
That's split amongst too. So that's like about 30 or 40 in each one of those.
Good sized lofts for
Yeah,
that number of birds. Definitely.
well, that's good.
Well, that's good to know, because I've just basically inherited these lofts, so I never really know, are they a good size or are they not. The way we keep the birds is fairly unconventional, I think, for either show birds or homers or racing guys, in that we have pigeonholes on the walls, and then we have lots of perching, but the rest of the lofts are open plan.
So do you have a breeding program where you're trying to get your numbers back up to to keep it at a certain level, or you just let them free breed? Or
So it completely depends on what we've got going on. So if there's lots of research planned, then yes, I will normally have a breeding program, and I normally aim to breed about 40. If there's not much going on, then we don't breed any. So last year we weren't quite sure how much research was going to be happening, so I decided not to breed any birds, just to keep costs down, to be honest, because if you can keep the head count down by 40, obviously that costs a lot less, both in time and in food. We let the birds pair up naturally, so they pick a mate who they like the look of, and then we leave them to get on with it. I quite like a coloured pigeon. So we've got many blue bars, but if we have a white bird or a black bird or a checker, then I sometimes will foster the eggs over so that we get some pretty colours.
the real question I'm really curious about is, being Oxford University, a big university, was there already a pre-laid, like a Loft Manager program that you kind of came into, or did you create your own? Like, I'm really curious to see, how a university goes about loft management for the feeding program. We kind of talked a little bit about the breeding program, but I mean, vaccination, like how do you handle sick birds, all that.
So you'll probably have to break down those questions for me again, as I forget to talk about certain bits. So the role was there before I took it on, but I think it was a much smaller role. It was very much somebody just popped in, fed, watered, did a quick bit of cleaning. Sometimes the academics themselves would do the cleaning. That really doesn't happen anymore. So I'm basically fully responsible for all the husbandry. So on a day-to-day basis, I'll pop in first thing in the morning and just do a quick health check. So as I'm sure you know, you can health check the birds literally in a couple of minutes, because you get to recognise the birds and what their usual behavioural patterns are. So if you look in there, you can scan round and you say, yeah, everyone's fine. You look in there and then you see, oh, so-and-so is sat on the floor there looking a bit fluffed up. They don't normally do that behaviour, so I then know that I need to pop in, pick them up, give them a quick check over. And then it depends really what time of year it is. So during the winter, the birds don't do any research. So in that case, I probably then would just feed and water. During the summer, when the birds are out on experiments, I often don't feed and water, because we tend to do that at the end of the day to provide the birds with some motivation. In terms of sick birds, we have a hospital cage. We've got 2 hospital cages actually, which have a little heat lamp. So if we see a bird that's been injured or somebody who's not looking too good, then I isolate them from the rest of the birds and they go in and get some TLC in the hospital cage. We're very lucky that we've got a sort of in-department vet who's absolutely amazing. She really, really knows her birds. So if we have any sort of issue, we're in this amazing position that I can just phone up the vet and say, I've got this problem with this bird. I'll send them over a photo, and normally she pops out. I'm also allowed to keep medication on site. So there's a fair amount that I can do myself in terms of treating sick or injured birds.
Do you vaccinate your birds at all?
Yes, so once a year we vaccinate for paramyxovirus, and I vaccinate our youngsters when they're about 6 weeks old as well.
So you were talking about in the summertime, you guys are doing releases and stuff, like only in the summertime. They're not loft flying around Oxford University, and you only do that for releases?
Yeah, so the birds generally are free range. So they have Sputniks. Is that what you would call it in the States?
Like the trap cage?
Yeah, like the trap cage. So we call them Sputniks, which I think comes from the Belgium term for the trap cage. I guess it's a very strange word. It confused me at the beginning quite a lot. I was like, huh? Oh, what? So they're kept open most of the time, so the birds can come and go as they please. When we're doing experiments, they tend to get closed down just so when the researchers arrive in the morning, all the birds are inside, so they can go in and catch them up easily without having to stand outside waiting for them to come in.
Okay, so then they actually just free fly, then they can come and go when they want. And until it's experiment time. Okay. Can you tell us about some of the experiments that you guys are doing with these birds?
Most of our research is looking at short distance navigation rather than the, I guess, bigger questions of the long distance navigation. I think probably back in the day they started looking at that kind of stuff, and it's sort of been narrowed down to this short distance. I think it was Oxford who discovered that pigeons use landmarks. I think that's a fairly known thing these days. Oxford found out that they create a visual map, and then when they start to get towards an area they know, they will look for landmarks such as church steeples or motorways, and then they'll follow those to get themselves home. More recently, probably in I guess around the last 10 years, they've been looking at more of a collective navigation. So how does a flock decide how it's going to navigate itself home? So we know that birds tend to fly in flocks for safety, but we've then tried to investigate who is the leader of the flock and why they become the leader. Is it because they're the fastest? Is it because they're the most experienced? Is it because they're the oldest? Is it because they're highest in the hierarchy within the loft, so they always get first dibs on the food? Things like that. And then what would happen if, for example, you were to take the leader away?
How is that information coming out? Have they determined that there's a pecking order and that kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure. So we definitely know that flocks will have a leader. There will be one bird who decides where the rest of the flock is going. What we've then been trying to do is to shake up those groups. So by taking out the leader and putting in another leader who perhaps has been leading a different flock, and then see if the rest of the flock trust their leadership skills or not. So it could be that your leader comes in and makes some bad navigational choices, and then the rest of the flock will override that bird's decisions and go in the way that they know is to be correct. So it's kind of like if you're a bad boss, you get demoted, and then the second in command gets promoted, if you like.
Huh. They have a little pigeon mutiny, huh?
Yeah.
Well, it's two different governments, actually.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right.
Oh, no politics here, please.
Well, no, realistically, it would be two different organizations.
The two separate flocks, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. I never even thought about that. I guess when I'm watching my racers, sometimes, we'll sit out there and be like, oh, this guy's in front, and that guy's in front. But you talked before earlier about you guys will release the flock, but then you'll also release individuals or pairs or.
Yeah, so we do quite a few solo flights. So the birds will learn their route home on their own, and then sometimes we pair them up. So you can again see which bird has the most influence on the route home. So it could be you've trained one bird to home, and it will slowly learn the most efficient route. And then you'll take another bird who's also learned its own most efficient route, and you'll match them together so that they choose very different routes. And then you'll see, do they take the average, or do they choose to go with the elder bird or with the bird who's higher in the hierarchy, or do they separate and decide to fly home in their own directions using the route that they know best?
That's really cool.
Do you guys track this with like GPS bands on their feet and you can watch it, or?
So they wear GPS devices on their back. So unfortunately, we can't watch it. So to be able to sit there and watch it in real time, you'd need satellite tags, which are unbelievably expensive. So we don't have the funding for that at the moment. So it's all done on GPS device.
I was just watching a video where they put the bird of prey trackers on the pigeons, and they were following the intersections, which is just what you described earlier.
So the bird of prey trackers, again, they're expensive. They're probably about £150 a pop. Whereas the GPS devices we get, they're used for sports. I think they're maybe £30 each. So we can go and get a job lot, and then we sort of break open the casing they're in and try and take all the weight out, because obviously you can only put a certain amount of weight on a pigeon before you can release it and expect it to home to the best of its ability.
Oh, that's cool. So you guys have kind of engineered one that's already mass produced and that's a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, in research, everything's about cost cutting. You only get given a certain amount of money, and normally it's not quite enough. So if we can find a way to cut the costs, then we will.
How heavy is that contraption altogether?
Oh, that's a question. I think it's about 11 grams.
11 grams.
Oh, sorry, this again.
No, it's a baby crested gecko, probably.
There you go. So
Precise.
I can send a gecko back and forth on a pigeon without hurting its back too much. That's interesting. So you talked about, you guys hold the feed so that way the birds will come back to the loft for feeding. Do you guys ever practice any other motivation like widowhood or anything like that?
Yeah, our only motivation we use is the food.
Okay.
We actually, we do something that's probably fairly common practice with racing guys, is that we've got a big tambourine that we shake every time that we feed. So the birds get habituated to the sound of the tambourine. So if they're in the area, we can shake this and hopefully it'll encourage them to come in, because we do have it occasionally where the birds will choose to sit on a roof of a farm building across the way or something, when actually we really need to get them back in the loft, so we can go out and shake this tambourine around, and that normally encourages them to come in.
That's cool. A tambourine.
Cool.
Huh? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now I got a reason to buy a tambourine.
Right. Yeah. I'm out there whistling like an idiot when I could be making nice music.
I have a rainbow colored flag to shake at my birds to make them fly.
Yeah.
I mean, you could probably use that as well. I've been thinking about this recently, whether we could draw, I don't know, like a massive circle, a massive X on the top of one of the high buildings in the area, so that they would spot that from a real distance and then go, haha. But I suppose that would be very similar to finding a landmark and following it. Actually, now I've thought about it.
Well, the rollers, some of those guys, they put X's on the top of their boxes. Rollers only go like in a 500-foot circle, typically. They seem to think that they can distinguish, one box from another by putting a different top on them. All of mine are natural, so I don't know. But they sometimes can't tell the two boxes apart. The older birds are just fine with it, but sometimes they get them in the wrong spot.
Yeah, it takes a lot of repetition, doesn't it, for them to start to twig?
Yeah, and some of those, I've read articles about those portable lofts, and with the portable lofts, for the roller portable lofts, they'll have the box painted, bright yellow or something like that, and the birds will be trained out of that box. But then the flyer can drive the box to a park and turn his rollers out, and they'll recognize that box and come back down into the box. They're not really like homers that go big distances. I would assume they're more visual in that way.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. The rollers go up, and they go pretty much only go out as far as they can see from home.
So why is that? Educate me a little bit on a roller pigeon.
They really don't have much of a homing instinct at all. They've been bred to just stick around. They only fly for short amounts of time. Some guys say that they can toss them up to 6 miles away and they'll come home, but I think they can see about 2 miles, I think.
But when they're up there that high, and they got good eyes.
But most mine have ever gone out is a half a mile, and I thought I was going to lose them. That's a big deal with the rollers and the overflies, because a roller doesn't tend to go up as high unless something made it go up.
Yeah.
The higher up you go, the farther you're going to see, right? That's just kind of the way I get a better vantage point from up high. Whereas a racer, they seem to have them superpowers,
That makes sense with what we were saying about the landmarks, doesn't it? Because if you've got a church steeple, and if you've got vision that's that good, then it really, really helps. Yeah,
I mean, and I think everybody around here is kind of far apart, and my roof is just a big solid metal roof. I have really good luck with homing stuff here. Even the racers, we've been really successful, but I think that has a lot to do with it, because they can see this building here. If they do happen to go up or overfly too far, they got something to look for.
And I suspect maybe the sun reflects off it too.
Oh yeah, it's silver, so they should be able to see it from everywhere.
What's really amazing is those birds that I've been in downtown Phoenix, where every house looks exactly the same on the street for a couple of miles. the backyard, everything looks the same. And, guys will be flying pigeons out of there and those birds come right back to that spot, and everything just looks copy and pasted on the block. They're noticing something.
They don't tend to fly too far away. That's the thing. They're a half mile away. That's only a mile circle. They're looking for that one particular box or that. It's crazy how they can notice the patterns and shapes, but we talked about that before with forgot.
Big Man?
I think it was Fern. I think it was Fern, yeah.
Fern and Big Man, yeah.
So it all kind of goes together.
Huh. Lucy, have you guys ever tried using dropper birds to bring the birds back in quicker?
No, and I don't actually know what you mean by a dropper bird.
Like some guys will use like fantails or old German owls, bright white birds that don't really fly that well, but whenever they're bringing their birds back, they'll stand 20, 40 feet away from their loft and throw the droppers up, and then those droppers will trap into the loft, through the bobs or the Sputnik. And then the ones that are up in the air will see that and recognize it's feed time. And so that brings them down real quick. So like when the guys are racing their birds, like you're saying, the last thing they want them to do after a long race is to go sit on the neighbor's roof and, look at the loft. They want them to come and trap so they can hit the clock and, get it back in. So they'll use droppers to bring them in really fast.
Sounds very similar to what we do with the tambourine, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, what Phil just described would be typically known as a decoy. You can use them in a cage to just set them out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a visual cue, like the rollers. We want to keep them up in the air all together in the same group. If you take a bird, if one bird comes down, it can ruin the whole performance because the rest of the birds will want to come down with it. It's effectively a dropper at that point.
So Lucy, handling all these birds, do you have a favorite pigeon?
Yes, I have a few. All our birds have got rings on, so we use the numbers sort of for any record keeping we do. Some of them have names, quite a few of them have names, and unfortunately we do all have our favourites, which I'm sure some academics would tell you is not the way to do research, but we like to. I think it's affectionate towards certain birds, and it shows that our staff really care about the birds and that we've sort of got an emotional attachment to them. I do always have favourites. It seems to literally be the kiss of death. If we have a bird that gets injured, I can guarantee it's one of my favourites or one that I've given a name. Absolutely guarantee it. So I had a little red bird called Curly, and she was the sweetest little thing. I loved her, she loved me. And she got eaten by a sparrowhawk in the most savage way. So this hawk got into the loft and it decided it was going to eat little Curly, probably because she was quite timid and probably not too sort of danger savvy. And one of my colleagues went in the loft and saw that she had been wounded. Well, she had been killed in this way. Decided, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a photo of little Curly because she's not going to believe this, and send it to her. This was a Saturday morning, and I open up my messenger and there's this photo of this bird. Honestly, I collapsed on the stairs in floods of tears because I was so upset that she'd been killed in that way. It was awful. I've got one little favourite at the moment who I call Tiny Tim because he was the last bird that bred last year, so he's a bit smaller than the others, and he's just really cute.
That's cool. And that's kind of fun that you, like you said before, you can kind of pick and choose who's pairing up so you can get colors that you like and, handle them when they're young and stuff like that.
Yeah, very unscientific. Don't tell my boss that I do that.
That's the word.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we talked with Professor Wasserman about some of the IQ tests they were doing, and I was, hey, do you give them names? And oh no, it's they all got band numbers, and that's what we do. We don't want to give them names, but it's like, you're the one who's taking care of them. These guys are the ones just doing the tests. So I think it's good that you give them names, and it's like you said, it just shows that you guys care about them and you're taking care of them and you're full circle with them. So that's good.
I think so. I'm not going to say I encourage it, but I certainly don't have an issue with members of the team that get attached to certain animals. I don't believe that it means that those animals get looked after any better or any worse than the others. So yeah, it doesn't bother me at all. I just like knowing actually that people have got this emotional attachment to certain birds. I think that's a nice trait to have.
So you don't have pigeons at home, right? You said you got dogs and horses, but no pigeons?
No pigeons. So I did have. So back in 2020 in lockdown, I found a little baby pigeon who had fallen out the nest at the stables where I keep my horse, and I called her Courtney Dove. For anyone who gets the
awesome.
popular, the music reference. And she was a little white garden dove. And she came into my life at just a perfect time. So I was single, it was lockdown had just started, so very much at home by myself. And I then came across this, I don't know how old she was. She could have only been maybe a week old. So she was really, really dinky. So I hand reared her. And she brought me so much joy. So she then was fully imprinted on me. She adored me. I adored her. We went everywhere together. If I had to go into work, she would come with me in a little pet carrier. And I obviously was feeding her, and she would sit on my shoulder, and I would take the dog for a walk and she would come along too. Oh, she was just the dream. And then she would come in the house in the evening, and I had trained her so that she would go into her bed. So I'd say, Courtney, in your bed. And she would fly straight down into her little basket. And yeah, she was wonderful. And then on Boxing Day of Christmas 2020, she went missing. So I would let her out in the morning so she could go and free fly. And then when she came home, I would let her straight back into the house again. And we had just had snowfall, which doesn't happen all that often in the south of England. And so I told myself, oh, she's just got confused in the snow and she hasn't been able to find her way home. So I went out around the park and I was calling her, and I drove around the place trying to find her, and she never came back. And I was heartbroken, to be quite honest with you, which sounds ridiculous. She's just a pigeon, but she was a huge part of my life during that sort of lonely, miserable spell that was COVID lockdown. Yeah. So I have kept one in the house before, and she was the most incredible pet. She was so rewarding. She was so smart. And she just adored me. She absolutely adored me, and it was a very mutual feeling.
Yeah, we got a pigeon in the house. That's our house pet, and I've had the variety of pets in the house, and they kind of take care of themselves in a lot of ways. They're not messy, and they are really affectionate. I mean, they really are. And the more time you spend with them, the more that bond strengthens, and they're a very cool pet. I totally get it.
Mm-hmm. I would love another, but I think the issue I have now is that because I'm fully back at work, I think it would be quite a lonely lifestyle to have a single bird in the house. And as I'm sure you know, if you've got one, you form this incredible bond with them. As soon as you bring another or a third in, then all of a sudden they remember that they're pigeons, and actually they would rather hang out with their pigeon friends. Which just means that actually I'd find it quite hard leaving one bird at home all day by themselves, because obviously they're intelligent, they need stimulation. So I think it would be a bit mean to leave one at home.
Totally makes sense. It changes the whole dynamic. If you have a pigeon that's boy or a girl, and you say, oh, it needs a mate, and then you hook them up and they're not friendly anymore,
which is heartbreaking.
It totally changes, when they mate, especially when they have start rearing their own babies, that becomes their family, and they focus on that. A singular one is great, because you are their family, and everything is in that spectrum.
If you're gonna have one, you only can have one. That's it. Otherwise it's not the same. And like the lady said, I don't think that having one is the way to do it.
For the pigeon's sake, just being alone, basically.
Just knowing that how they get along, and they have they're a flocking bird. And if you're away, they don't have anybody to hang out with.
It works out for me. I got a flock of kids, so they're always pulling Fluffy out and holding Fluffy. It was funny. I had that bird out a couple days ago, and I had my racing team out, and they had the bath pan down, so they're all taking a bath, and Fluffy's like, our house pigeon. She's out on the porch, and I set her down, and she goes to walk over to the bath pan, but she turns and goes so that way she's on the sidewalk. Like, man, this pigeon doesn't even know it's a pigeon. Like, it's walking down the sidewalk to go check out these other birds, and it's a trip. They're really neat animals. But Lucy, thanks for coming on, and really appreciate you coming on and talking about what might possibly be one of the coolest jobs there is. Keep up the good work with it too. That sounds
Thank
like
you.
a lot of
So,
fun.
yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you both, because it's not all that often I get to speak to people who are into pigeons. So I can not chew the ear off people if they get me started, but it's not always a topic that people want to sit there and listen to be honest. So yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Lucy.